Alone in the Dark, the 2024 release. You know, this was definitely something that has been long wanted. Now, this was also, this was released in March of this year, at the time of this recording. But the prelude chapter, and it was pushed back from a release last year. With the prelude chapter, May 2023, showcasing what they've done with the system and with the game. And it can be best said it is a remake of the original game that came out in the 90s with some major story changes. And as you play it, you actually see nods to that. Now, first of all, we have Jeremy Hartwood, who, in the original game, he's dead. We have Grace Saunders introduced into the game here. She doesn't show up until quote Jack in the Dark, or if we're talking main series games, Alone in the Dark 2. The game still takes place at their setup, but instead of being the home someone lives in, it's now an asylum. I mean, there's some serious changes to the game. Now, when you play the game, it opens up with literally an almost exact remake of the opening from the original game, except you have both Emily Hartwood and Edward Carnby in the car. They are discussing things about this case. She had hired him to basically go there with her to check on her uncle and, if need be, get him out of there. And so we have an opening that is pretty much almost exact to how this game technically opens. I mean, except this time when you select your character, it happens after arriving at their setup. And this is how much this is part of all the love they show to the game. They basically come down the road for Derceto. They basically go there to, talk to, driving up, and they get there, and you get the frog jumping across the road. This time eaten by an alligator. The car goes by. They get there, and you must choose if you're either playing as Emily or you're playing as Edward. And if you play as, well, depending on who you play as, the narrative changes a bit. And this is a very nice touch because it makes each playthrough unique to the characters. even in their endings, and I didn't see Emily's normal ending. I mean, I saw the normal ending with Edward. I saw the bad ending with Edward. I saw the what is considered the best ending in my recordings. I didn't get to see the bad ending, according to, you know, for Emily, because I didn't complete the collectibles that unlock that. And that was another nice thing they had. They put in collectibles in this game, and believe it or not, if you pay attention to the collectibles, there are definite nods to the games in there. Now, the narrative changes are a nice touch because they link to a key part. Now, you see, as you progress through the game, you get a talisman that can, or you discover about a talisman and you are shifting into side memories or made worlds. First one, of course, is like you're heading back to the French Quarter in New Orleans, where you're first finding out things. Of course, whoever you play as, the other person doesn't know this is happening, but they're doing their own side investigation as well, trying to also find Jeremy and unlock certain, find out what's going on at their setup. Now, of course, one takes you into, of course, New Orleans. There's another one that'll take you to Lafayette Cemetery in New Orleans. One that'll take you to a place called the Hateful Mound, where there's one hell of a creature, which you won't see that creature again if you're playing as Edward. But if you're playing as Emily, you do run into it again. You go through a trip to the New Orleans area, the shipping district, which then leads you to a temple out in Egypt. Oh, and I also forgot that you get to go to this missionary place known as Tarawea. Now, all these places, you are just jumping to these through side things and using the talisman, which ties in with solving puzzles. And these puzzles are brilliantly inserted into the game. And I say this because they work sort of well with the story. I mean, to find the way to open a lock, you need to get these medicine bottles together. Or you must turn over the correct portraits of certain individuals. You must solve like sliding puzzles to complete a picture. These are simple puzzles with and they're beautifully worked into the game. They seem natural, even though they're a bit odd, but natural all the same. To get things like coordinates or find a key or something that you're going to need. And each section of the game, as you play through it, it's unlocking new areas, unlocking other areas. And everything you find is a clue. It helps unlock the story, helps reveal the story. Because the big story is Jeremy has made a contract with the Dark Man. And I'm going to probably butcher the name because they do say it in the game, but, Edward's like, I understand why you call him the Dark Man. It is Narlephath, I think, from Lovecraftian lore. Because again, the original game was was inspired by Lovecraft lore. So you are trying to. Jeremy makes a pact with the Dark Man to save people from another darker evil. Because the people there, quote, worship the black god of the woods. The black goat of the woods. This is, I believe, the Shub Niggeroth. I think it's a hard name to say. And if you say it wrong, it sounds very vulgar. I'd prefer to just say Shub, to be honest. That is the black goat of the woods. They had him rewrite the ritual, but because of his, quote, disappearance, it threatens things. So, of course, they want to find him so they can still perform their St. John's Eve ceremony with the changes. Everybody there is somewhat aware of something. But you're also finding out that that your main characters are suppressing memories as well. In fact, when it comes to the fourth chapter, you are working to break the contract. This will involve 3 trips into pocket realms or memories or whatever. One, sounds like Jeremy's on a riverboat, the big paddle wheels and all that. So you have to, help get it free. This is to solve one. The second is your own self-deceit, which helps explain the stories, why the narratives are different. You see, when you're playing as Edward Carnby, Grace remembers him, but he doesn't seem to remember her. But what is revealed is that Edward had been working a case to find a man who abducted his daughter, was going to disappear with her. The wife had hired him to. This was Grace that he was looking for. The man was her father, and when you find him and you discover he had died, the father had died because the vehicle had basically driven off a bridge into the river. Edward was able to rescue Grace, but not the father. But he took her back to her mother. A job is a job. That kind of mentality. He thought he was taking her back to a better, to someone who cared, but now she ended up here at Derceto. Very sad when you think about it. But if you're doing Emily's story, she, quote, believed she was of the thought process that her husband died in the war. But the actual case was is that he had contracted the Spanish flu and literally was taken to Derceto before it was an asylum in hopes of recovery and did not. So, yeah, you have them uncovering their own deceptions that they told themselves. And then in the last memory of that chapter, they jump back to, quote, they end up going to a location in Greenland where there is this weird structure, an observatory. And you have to first defeat this man there that acts as sort of like as a gatekeeper of it. And then after you align things in the observatory, he apparently comes back to life as this monster, and you have to fight that off using what now looks like a special dagger. In reality, what you've ended up doing was giving Jeremy an ice pick lobotomy. Returning to Derceto, and you could talk to everybody before the final part of the game happens, depending on what collections you've also completed. And that was another nice thing that they added to this. There are tons of collectibles, all in sets of 3, that you can unlock lore with, and certain sets actually unlock certain things. One set unlocks a memory that can be located in the attic, which is a reference to the original game. And in turn, it adds to it that the original games are another timeline. The way Jeremy talks, it changes the story. And there's even some little nods in the endings. In what is considered the best ending, you do have Grace remarking about should have pirates in it and gangsters, which is a nod to Alone in the Dark 2. In Emily's regular ending, they end up, the 4 survivors of it, of what happened there at Derceto, as far as we know, you have Jeremy, Emily, Edward, and Grace. And as they're leaving the burning wreckage of what was Derceto, Jerry remarks that she has to go with us. She's important. You gotta take her to Hell's Kitchen. Again, another reference to the original second game. Now, of course, some of the other things, when you complete these collectible sets, you can unlock things. Like, the shotgun gets unlocked when you complete one set. 3 other sets allow you to unlock alternate endings. Two bad, one best. I mean, if you collect all the ones that I didn't finish until I actually replayed it before doing this recording, Emily's bad ending. When you collect everything for it, just at the end of the trip to Greenland, Emily runs into, of course, after coming back, the Dark Man, what more do you want? Where you can actually, at that point, put your hands in a symbol, like she puts her hand in a symbol to, quote, ward off evil. And she sort of locks in to this bad ending, where she then ends up in the temple with both Grace and a character named Ruth, who, if you play Emily's game, you sort of run into such that they start making a friendship. A friendship that wouldn't necessarily be smiled upon in 1920s, 1930s, where Edward Carnby doesn't necessarily, he's sort of learning more in how he relates to Grace. But even in his bad ending, when he tells Emily to run, because he's one of the crazies, that's if you complete another set. He, when she runs off, thinking she has Jeremy with her, and she looks in the car, and there's Ruth with her. It's a little bit of a surprise to her, a little bit surprise to the player if you played Edward's story first. And those are the two bad endings. But you also unlock the best chance at the best ending by giving Grace something to play with. That's the good ending, where it seems Edward and Emily are married and Grace is their daughter. And they're actually coming out of the magician show or something at where the magic show where Jeremy first saw the Dark Man. And of course, if you go with the normal endings, where the patients attempt to hang Grace, which she is, quote, a willing participant in, and ends up getting sort of, and it awakens Shub in the tree. Another, nod to the original game. And you have to now, fight this massive creature using all the weapons you have and trying to stay alive throughout the whole thing. This is a very tricky battle, and it took me a while to get done. But when you're successful, Edward and Emily meet up outside with Jeremy, and Grace shows up, having survived her little part of the ordeal. And then they head off. This is a game that Pisces Studio did very well with. They put into the love into it to make it what it was. And even the campaign and the DLC that you could get with it. You could make the characters look like they looked in the 90s game, 1990s game, which it's a neat thing to do. It's a little jarring, but it's neat. And items in the game, they bear, resemblances and nods to the original trilogy. I've read other things or nods to other attempted reboots. This was the game that really recaptured what the original had. It did very well. Now, it didn't necessarily sell well at its time of release, and there are people who have played it who enjoyed it. I enjoyed it, and I knew of the original. I mean, I find nods to the original trilogy everywhere in this game. It's some of the collectibles you collect are reminiscent. You can find what looks like the box for the original game. Of course, it's not a box for a computer game. That doesn't fit the narrative. You can find a napkin that actually looks like the cloth you can use to cover the one painting. There are other things that are just, and some of the side stuff is just acknowledges the original game. A Jack in the Box. That's a beautiful collectible that takes a nod to the original, games that came out in the 90s. Mention of a script for a movie called Slaughter Gulch. That's the third game. The mentioning of the pirates and gangsters, and even Jeremy saying in Emily's ending, regular ending, they got to take her to Hell's Kitchen. That's all nods. And after, of course, hearing that, and of course, witnessing that memory, and also I had been playing like Sherlock Holmes: The Awakened, the for the rebooted games of the Sherlock Holmes series by Frogwares. This did something beautiful, acknowledging the predecessor, acknowledging that it was a possibility. It's another story. This game did things beautifully right. Of course, because of its poor performance on release, Pisces Studio fell victim to Embracer Group, and they shut the studio down. This is a sleeper hit, if anything. It's beautifully done. If you've played the originals and then played this, you'd probably agree. If you played both stories and thought, oh, well, they're the same, no, you're not paying attention. There are changes in the narrative. Yeah, it goes faster because there's certain things you know now, but it's beautifully done. I don't care what you say. This is a beautifully done game. This would be the one that they could do it with the second game, setting it up. They've set things up to redo the second one if they wanted to, but the studio's been shut down. That's a shame. It's a good game. Get it. Even the prequel, which is Grace in the Dark, it's still free on Steam to download and play. It's only like a 10-minute game, but it gives you a feel of what to expect in Alone in the Dark 2024 release. This is what the game needed for so long, and they did it very well. Boo and hiss to Embracer Group. And that's all I'm going to say about Alone in the Dark 2024. I hope you listened to this entirely. I hope you enjoyed it. I do hope you check out my playthrough of the game. I may have my arguments with the game, and it's more with my computer, but this is worth the play. Take care, all, and bye.